Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week 5 $1 Million Mission, hosted by Occupy Fantasy, at Occupy Fantasy, at YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. I am the co-founder and data guru here at Occupy Fantasy, alongside Brian, at Brian Jester FF on Twitter is where you can find him, co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. How's it going, Brian?
What's up, Moose? Last year it took us until week 7 to have an existential crisis, and just looking around Discord and Twitter and all those good places, people are already in existential crisis mode through 5 weeks. So I'm here with you to help calm some people down, talk about what we've seen so far through 5 weeks of NFL DFS, and we love doing these Tuesday shows. So good to see you. What's up?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when we hit existential crisis, it usually means you tell me to run a bunch of data stuff to make sure we're not going crazy. And I'm slowly hoping that we don't have to come to that. And
We're not there yet.
I spent like 4 straight days data grinding again. But yeah, we're here to break down Brian's lineups from last week, how he did. Let's take a look at other pros as well, see how they did, and see what some winners did. Because not all the times pros win. So sometimes you get those single bullet actions. So let's just start off. And if we take a look here at how Brian did, we'll see first that he did. This is tickets, because I clicked the wrong button first, but entry fees and tickets for live finals. Again, no tickets, but Brian, as you and I were talking, your ROI is actually starting to increase on tickets. Like, you're getting second, third, fourth, and you're getting you're getting so close, but just not there for tickets.
It's so close, so close. So if I'm just looking at just October, right? So that's 11 days in October, and we look at just King of the Beach qualifiers, which I only have 1 ticket so far. It feels like I should have a lot more. In October alone, I have 3 second place finishes in King of the Beach qualifiers. I have 3 third place finishes, 2 fourths, and a 5th in 11 days, like 5 slates. So it's been frustrating to say the least, getting really close, and obviously this past week in Classic, which we'll talk about here in a second, was super frustrating, getting close. But we know the ticket game. We know the live final ticket game, right? Other tickets, much easier to win. The ROIs aren't going to look like this, but the live final game, it's tough. You got to get first. So it is what it is. It was a pretty good week overall, but frustrating, I think, is the best way to describe it.
Definitely. And if we take a look at how you've done in Classic Slate, or cross non-ticket stuff as well, in Smallfield, you're back up in the green. Woohoo.
Yeah.
Plus 1.9% ROI. A little over 106,000 in entries, 108 and some change in winnings for some cool profit. 150 Max Classic, minus 73% ROI, and 150 Max Showdown, minus 76% ROI. And I'll let you speak, and there is something I do want to talk about Showdown as well before we move on to the next
Okay,
one.
but just real quick, my first thought was that, I mean, the entry fees pile up in Smallfield, and I guess I didn't really realize, just looking back, like, wow, over 6 figures through 5 weeks in Smallfield is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But again, feel confident with the process there. Actually, I know we talked about, was it on Saturday or Tuesday? Whenever we talked about the mega stacking in Smallfield, looking at Chipotle and stuff. I actually did that this week. And if if just like 1 or 2 chalk pieces don't go off, I win everything because I mega stacked a couple games. And so we'll bring that contest up and we'll talk about that strategy. But what were you thinking about Showdown?
Yeah, I did want to point out the largest, was it last night, the largest tie in FanDuel history. 1,800 way tie. 200 at first, but it was really like $150 each person got. Yeah, normally this, I mean, we can talk about it for a minute or two, and if you guys have questions, you can go ahead and ask as well. FanDuel and maybe DraftKings as well. We've talked about it, Brian. Another kicker in the lineup.
Yeah.
It's on. I've done this data for FanDuel, and I think Chris as well has done some for DraftKings. Is it time in any contest type, low risk, high risk, ticket, whatever? I honestly do think it's time for min 1 kicker and or defense. Or is it even time to just say min 1 kicker? It's been optimal, like, I don't know what, an average winning lineup on these big GPPs, optimal lineups, average a 1.1 kicker and defense combined. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Which is higher than years past, right?
Yeah, years past is about anywhere between 0.4 and 0.6.
So obviously we have the defense added, right? So that adds that total. But as far as overall kickers, it's been higher by a decent margin, right?
Yeah, let me pull up the kickers really quick. I have the sheet here. Hold on. Let's see. Let's see. So this is just FanDuel specific. I'm crazy, and I actually just like manually tabulate a bunch of stuff for FanDuel. My eyes bleed every showdown slate. But if we look here, so this year it's been on average 0.6 kickers in a lineup, and on average 0.4. So higher than before. And who's gotten that decrease? It's been quarterbacks actually. On average, from inception of FanDuel Showdown, an average of 1.3 quarterbacks are in a lineup. This year, it's 0.9. So down significantly. About, what did I say, Brian? Like a 30-40% decrease.
Yeah,
or something like that. All the other positions are roughly the same. Running backs down a little bit as well, but kickers are up and quarterbacks are down. And unders are hitting, as we talked about, in a 60% rate when historically they're about 54%. So games are going under. Kickers are being optimal. Curious to hear your thoughts.
I mean, the games just suck first and foremost, and we got some really bad matchups. And if you want to test this strategy, you got a great game to do it on Thursday with Chicago and Washington. Total's down 37.5. I think Chris was telling us this morning that second lowest total ever in a primetime showdown game. Yeah. And if you look at those, the defense was optimal 60% of the time. Kicker, I think, was less so, but that was on DraftKings. Yeah, but yeah, it's just if we get these low totals in these bad games, fucking dude, just hammer it. Like it's kind of crazy. It's going to come back to the mean at some point, but we'll use totals to our advantage. We're going to keep putting 37 point, 39 point, and 43 point totals on primetime. Just don't let kickers and defenses beat you in showdown anymore. I was joking with my tweet the other day about it, but like it's like kind of half serious. It gets crazy how optimal kickers and defense have been showing up in the winning showdown lineups.
And what if it doesn't regress? We had it a few weeks ago. Obviously, it may regress some, but what if it doesn't go back to what historically it's been and kickers start to be? Because you play a lot more Smallfield than I do. Have you noticed an uptick of other professional players or casual or anybody in general playing more kickers? I noticed that Carlson last night was like stupid owned, and yet, of course, he was in the optimal. So I'm curious, have you been noticing any other industry playing kickers more often?
A little bit more in Smallfield, a little more double kicker. Honestly, I think that's especially where you should be hammering. I know I lost the King of the Beach last night to a double kicker lineup, which, again, it kind of sucked because last night I thought there were a lot of mid-range options that should have beat them, and just the way the game played out, that's how it happened. But yeah, man, I think Smallfield especially. I mean, honestly, I've been crushing Smallfield Showdown on FanDuel, playing a ton of kickers. Matthew Wright was 8% in a 3-3-3 last night. Naturally, missed field goals and extra points, of course, when I played him. But like he was 8%. I think Carlson was 15% or something. Yeah. So Smallfield, especially FanDuel, it's a pretty big edge, I think, right now.
Nice. Yeah. So keep an eye on that, and if you're using the lineup builder, min one kicker. And let's finally, the last thing that we can show here is for Survivor. We're out. Thank you, Brian, for keeping us eliminated, and my heart pounding every time I see this image. And then for Pick'em, didn't do so hot. Again, we have 10 total entries. This is on the DraftKings Pick'em pool. You pick 5 games against the spread, where the spread is released every Wednesday. Does not change. So there usually are some popular plays on the line moves. We went, what was it?
3 and 4, right?
3 and 4, something like that. And of course, everyone else does well. We were bubbling around the cash line last week. Not so much this week. Our highest entry is 12 and 8. Our lowest is 9 and 11. But, Brian, as I'll say, the chalk in that contest has been smashing. It seems like everything over 25% hits. So if that goes back to the mean, and we're hovering, what did I say? 9 of our 10 entries are 50% or more winning. Yep. I honestly think if we can just keep this going and the chalk doesn't smash, those are those spike weeks we'll have in Pick'em.
Gotta avoid the chalk in every aspect of life and every aspect of gambling. Yeah, and keeping the eliminated sign on screen to keep us humble. So, give us something to work for every single week.
I know. And speaking of chalk smashing, I was at the racetrack today, man, and I was picking some horses. I told my fiance to pick a horse to add to the exacta. Don't you know what came around? They were in first and second. Don't you know? Chalk came right around, just blew them right out of the water, completely crushed. I said, God, even in horse racing, chalk's gonna smash. Can't ignore the chalk.
The chalk is running high right now. You gotta just embrace it for the time being. Which by the way, as we move on here, it's gonna be a key point of this show. If you saw in the description, you saw in the tweet that we put out earlier, a lot of talk in the industry about ownership and about chalk smashing, rightfully so, after this past week, and just a lot of different conversations to be had. So I think that's what we'll reserve the next 20 minutes or so for. Just analyzing some contests, talk about some ownership, what we think's going on. Is it existential crisis mode yet? I don't think so. But what are your early thoughts through 5 weeks just on ownership and what's going on?
So I think my biggest thought is you have the Millie, which is like a billion people play. A lot of casuals, a lot of pros. Ownership can get kind of finicky there. And that's why some people will say, oh, why wasn't so-and-so 30%? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe a lot of people just click buttons and they just pick players or whatever. Now, if you're going to some of these smaller contests or these sharper contests, you'll really see that the chalk is very aspirated. Leonard Fournette, for example, in the Millie was, I think, 14%. But in some of the small field contests, Brian, that you played, he was closer to 25, 30%. And I think, Brian, I do this with FanDuel Showdown to try and help my process as well, where I'll take what happens in a large field, like the largest contest, whether it's the 200K to first, million to first, whatever, and then I'll look at other sharp contests, whether it's the Thunderdome or some of the other contests. I'll compare the ownership to that, and I'll see who I like to label it as a sharp or a square play. Who got more ownership in the sharp contest, or who got less ownership in the sharp contest, and I'll kind of reverse engineer. Okay, well, why were these players going so high in the sharp contest? Is there something that I'm missing? Go back and look at my process. So I think that's a really good way and something that I do to help identify why did I miss a certain player, or okay, no, I played it pretty good and I identified what I think were the sharp plays as well.
Yeah, I think comparing across different contest sizes, contest types, it's certainly going to influence. And again, like you said, those really large contests, ownership can get funky sometimes. Even Smallfield gets funky, like condenses in weird spots sometimes. But you just look at, because you can look at like the Fantasy Labs, which we'll bring up. Obviously, the free tools, they have the ownership, and you can look how a player is in different contests. I'm trying to pull it up, and my computer's acting so stupid here. But yeah, if you look at, Jesus Christ, where's the main slate? Okay, here it is. Like if you look at like Leonard Fournette, if I can find the freaking button here. Here we go. Okay, so Leonard Fournette, right? 12% in the play action, 14% in the Millie, 16% in the SPY, 24% in the 444, 30% in some of the contests I was in. You look at Godwin, 23% all the way up to 35%. Like this stuff, like it is what it is. And that's a common dynamic that we know about. I just think some people were thrown off by, oh, James Robinson was higher than Fournette in the Millie. Oh, and Chubb was higher than Fournette in the Millie. And yeah, that was surprising to say the least, but that wasn't the case in pretty much any other contest. So
yeah, and also I think something that also deals with it, why potentially the chalk could be smashing, is the pricing's been pretty terrible. Like it seems like you could fit anybody in that you want. And it's going to continue into next week as well, which we'll probably be talking about on the Saturday show as well. And as Chris points out, legend has it, Travis Kelce just scored again. And it was a 3-yard pass this time, not a 1-yard pass. But
now it's 28 yards.
Exactly. And a question here from Neil says, sorry, I'm a little behind in the video. What's considered small field for the ROI calculation?
Good question, Neil. For me, I'm looking at, it's basically less than 300-ish players. Less than 10 max, normally in the 6 max range, 3 max, less than 500 players for sure, GPPs.
Cool. Yeah, and the one thing that completely threw me off, and of course, chalk smash, is this running back situation for New England. We weren't entirely sure how it was going to be, and of course, they smashed. So.
Yeah, well, Harris got hurt basically immediately, and then Stevenson got like 100% of the touches. So naturally, at 17%, one of the highest running backs, he smashed. Yeah, I mean the pricing is just actually really bad. They're not adjusting. Like we'll see this week. There's so many running backs whose role changed or got increased roles, and their price is under 6K. Right? Like Rashad Penny clearly was hurt. They didn't change Kenneth Walker. Breece Hall, huge role, almost 100 yards receiving and rushing. Terrible price. Tyler Lockett, receiver. 5,600 last week, drops a 30 bomb. Geno Smith's playing like Joe Montana. and Lockett's still 5,600 in a great matchup. So it's just like, I mean, if that's going to continue to happen, then we're going to continue to see the sharp plays winning because the pricing is so bad. And yeah, that's something we have to think about too. But also, it would be nice, unlike this week, if they just didn't ceiling, right? And I know Justin Freeman, friend of the show, we have the Showdown guy with him. He had a nice little thread about when prices decrease, guys, and it's like a cyclical blow up. Player underperforms, finally blow up at a cheap price tag. The industry's on it because their price is so low. But also, with the price just stays low all the time, like some of these guys are, then I mean, they're going to be good plays. Should we expect them to hit ceiling performances every time like this week? No. Which brings me to a couple of the Smallfield contests I was in this week, which if you can bring it up, Moose, we'll talk about my lineup, we'll talk about the mega stacking, and talk about the fucking chalk festival that beat me in most of those lineups.
All right, so let's hope this successfully works and hides all my balances. We are good to go. Let's see. So this is your lineup that you have here. This is the NFL 40K touchdown, and you finished second for $4,000. And this is your lineup. You had Allen, Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Shakir, and ran it back with with Johnson, and did pretty awesome. Not gonna lie. And then, do you still want to talk about the lineup before I show who actually won?
Yeah, let's talk about this really quickly, right? Because if you remember Tuesday or Saturday, we talked about mega stacking. And as Chris talked in the plug, we talked about on Saturday, there was a great week to mega stack with two big favorites in Tampa Bay and Buffalo. And we knew the field wasn't going to mega stack. They never do. And if I can get 4 Bills and they put up 30 points like I thought they could, then not only am I going to have, because you're going to play some chalk here, right? Like Diggs was 17%, Shakir was 16% after McKenzie got ruled out, Allen was 13%. And I was like, yeah, but if I play all these guys together, no one's going to do that, as we'll see here shortly. Very tilting. So yeah, 4-1 Bill stack, which again, we figured is a really good move in Smallfield, especially in this type of, I thought it was the perfect setup, Moose.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah. The only thing I would say is we talked about potentially when such large favorites, the underdogs normally don't get there. Johnson was, I think you were the only person that had him, and he was your only ice cube, snowball, whatever you want to call it, snowflake. And at 6,100, that can be kind of tough to potentially justify. I can see why you did it. It's a great play. Bring back, if Pittsburgh doesn't absolutely suck the entire game, maybe he gets you there. But I don't have the pricing offhand for last week. Is there anyone that you thought you could have replaced him with, or were you dead set on bringing someone back with Buffalo, or it just kind of worked out that way?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we talked about it at length on Saturday. I made a Smallfield Josh Allen lineup that was 4-0 without bringing it back, and I made this 4-1. Naturally, the 4-1 was the one that did really well outside of the stack, of course. And if they didn't have 3 underperforming wide receivers on the other side, I wouldn't have brought it back for sure. I would just played 4-0 stacks with Josh Allen. Deontay Johnson had 13 targets. You tell me he gets 13 targets at 6,100. Yeah, I'll play him again for sure. But yeah, I could have played Godwin. I could have played Tyler Lockett. I would have won everything if I played Tyler Lockett because he was 5,600 and put up 30. So yeah, not super thrilled with it. Just naturally, I played a couple different ways, and really, if it wasn't for the underperformers, I wouldn't have brought it back at all. But as you see here, Gabe Davis 4%, despite it being the highest total on the week, despite other receivers being out, and yeah, only 4% had a 35 spot. I thought I had a really good chance to win it all. But as we'll see with Mark Levin's lineup, it was literally just a cash lineup, like some version of a cash lineup. As you click on his lineup moves, and you'll see that all of his players are just the craziest chalk in the world. Every single player was 12% or higher. All but 2 were basically 20% or higher. We have multiple 30 points. Cowboys defense, if they score 9 points or less, I win everything. They naturally get a fumble 6 right off the bat. So that's the one I'm most blown about, right? A 30% defense scores a touchdown, blocks a punt, right? You expect them to get sacks and turnovers. Okay, fine. I understand that, right? But to get the variance of the defensive touchdown, to get the variance of a block punt, which is super fluky, that's really tilting. But this is the lineup I'm supposed to be beating by stacking, right? Like the correlation is supposed to outweigh these types of lineups more than more often than not. It didn't this week, which is super tilting because when you have weeks like that and your mega stack goes off, you should be sweeping everything or at least getting close. And I did get close. When every single chalk piece goes off, that's how those fail. And again, like the 2 a week, you don't get 221 points out of your lineup very often, especially when you're not playing that much chalk. So yeah, that's what made it so frustrating to me because I literally finished second to this lineup in like 20 or 30 different contests.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, you even get the Olave concussed, but he still caught it, but he didn't catch it. But it still, yeah, still caught it. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I would love to know. I mean, I understand that you say this is more of like a cash build lineup because you have Buffalo with Josh Allen, great fantasy quarterback, great overall quarterback as well. But I mean, to not bring him back in a high risk contest, any player, other players in that game seems kind of crazy.
Bad. You can say bad because in a 200 player contest, right? Sure, can it get there? But this is what literally has to happen, right?
Yeah.
You have to. Every single one has to score a touchdown and get flames. Basically, was what happened. And as Chris says in the chat, Lockett, Olave, London, Godwin were all the chalk pieces right around Deontay Johnson, the piece I had in there. But just looking back, right? If you tell me, Moose, that all those guys are 30% or 25%, Deontay's 1%, and you tell me he gets 13 targets, I will take the 1% play every single time, no matter what. And sure, if Lockett and Olave are going to catch 3 touchdowns, fucking cool, great, I lose. So yeah, I hope this continues to happen, right? Because we're still going to be able to find good plays, right? Like Gabe Davis at 4%, we're going to find that. If the ownership's going to condense, like people are saying, is with all the bad pricing as we talked about, then we're going to find literally 1% plays that are just as good. Yes, their median's not the same, but their ceilings, if not higher, definitely the same. So, and Lucas says that was McLovin's cash team. So yeah, fucking cash team beats everything. That's the cash lineup. The cash line Moose was 180 in double ups this week.
That's like I'm pretty sure that's the highest I've ever seen. Yeah,
it's nuts. So it was a fluky week. From again, yes, projections are getting better. Yes, pricing is bad. Yes. But does that mean we should be playing cash lineups in these contests? No. Does that mean we can beat them with stacking? Yes, always. That's not going to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, there was one other thing I wanted to ask. What was it? I saw your lineup. What was I going to say? Yes. So, yes, I remember now. Sorry, when you were talking that, I made me lose thought. Now I remember. I do feel like we've been attacking defenses and injuries more. Just from a game stack perspective on identifying which game stacks are good. And I would have to actually go look at the data, but I feel like more defensive players are getting injured, or I don't know if and the backups suck even more or not, but I feel like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking my tongue tied, but the fact that it seems like the game stacks go off a lot more this year with people who have injuries on defense. What do you think?
Yeah, I might just be like an echo chamber of us just talking about it because I don't read too much other stuff, but you never see any other people talking about it. So I think that's still an edge that we have for sure. But it's just like one final point here, but then we'll move on. But Patriots defense 5%, top defense in our model. They put up 22. Right, we get the variance at 5% ownership. And then the 30% defense scores 1 more point to them. It's just like Raheem Mostert, 9% at 5K, puts up 22 points. It's like, okay, that's happening most of the time. We're winning, but the chalk outperformed both of them, which is this like, that's the tough part about GPPs, right? If you nail the low owned play, they have to do well, and the chalk has to fail. But I mean, it's the two sides of that coin, right? Mostly, if you play the chalk, they gotta succeed, and all the low owned players gotta fail. So I'd rather be on this side more often than not. So, and we got some. Oh man, we got some spam in the chat.
Oh, nice. Chat 69. Let's go. I will hold on. Let me copy this link first before I remove them. Hold on. Right, cool.
Lucas says that team was duplicated 54 times in the big $25 double up. So a very popular cash team. And the fact that I lost to it in GPPs, and the fact that no one else played it goes to show how stupid it was to play in GPPs, or how galaxy brain it was to play it because Mock knew no one else was going to play it. However, knowing what we know about McLovin, he generally does this with his cash lineup, his main lineup, so to speak. He does it in MMA, all the other contests I've seen. And yeah, when it goes off, it goes off.
Yeah. One other thing I'll mention, seems like defenses, the very, very low price defenses have been going off recently. I think Jacksonville a few weeks ago.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I know we've talked about this before, but I feel like defenses, you shouldn't care. If you have 2,100 left over or 4,000 left over, just punt it seems like defense has been one of the more punt plays this year, and it seems to be working very well.
Yeah, but and it all comes down to this again, it's a 5-week sample. Most
Yeah.
recently, everyone's so recency biased with this past slate, the past couple slates, and I get it, right? But we know long term, right? These, they're good plays, good medium plays, good ceiling plays, but they're ceilinging, that's a word,
Yeah.
at a higher rate in the last couple weeks than they have been all time. I don't think anything is too different about projections. Projections were good last year, right? They're not
Yeah.
that much better this year. They're good. Ownership about the same, right? So it's just the game hasn't changed that much to where we get ceiling performance out the highest owned players all the time. Is what it is. Real quick before we move on to anything else, you mentioned the big tie on FanDuel and Showdown. What a dynamic, right? What a dichotomy, because we had the biggest tie ever in Showdown on Monday night on FanDuel, and then on Thursday we had the Ultimate Galaxy Brain lineup that left the most money ever on the table. With that crazy double defense, double kicker, 17K remaining, single bullet hand build. Dude took all the drugs in the world building that by hand.
And it wasn't even optimal.
Yeah, no shit, it wasn't optimal. No one else played fucking 4 kickers and defenses and played Alec Pierce at captain, right? So, yeah. Shout out to him, because this is the sickest lineup ever to win with. I don't have a clue what goes through your mind when you hand build, and you're like, because if you're hand building, you're like, can I leave 3,000? That's kind of crazy. Can I leave 2,000? This motherfucker said, "Hey, I'm leaving $17,000, and I like this lineup." It's like, man, you are either from the future or you are just on a crazy amount of drugs.
The only thing I can think of would be if they're all like basically similar price, and he's like, "Oh shit, I just need a lineup real quick," and just hit the same button like below 4 or 5 times, and just left, completely forgot about it, and then hit it.
I'm almost positive that's close to the case, because Pierce was 5,400, and those other guys were like, the defensive kickers were like 4K. So it's very possible he was like, fuck. It's like a placeholder. It's like click, 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 click. And it's like, yeah, I swept every contest ever and set a record for least amount of salary remaining. Because like maybe in 150, maybe because you do see it most, right? 150, you see people leave like 20K on the table, and it's like, oh, these lineups are so bad. Maybe that happens in 150, but to hand build that, the placeholder argument's the best argument I could possibly come up with. I'm sure he actually works for NBC Sports Edge, so maybe he explained it somewhere. But just insanity, and that way to point that out.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing I'll point out as well, and I do want your opinion on this because we talked about it before, the field has gotten sharper in building showdown lineups. And let me go ahead and switch the image back real quick. And I just recently got back into 150 max game on FanDuel, and I sent you a couple lineups, and I'm like, man, I feel like this lineup shouldn't have been duplicated 50, 60 times. And I'm just trying to think. So, without giving away any secret sauce or anything like that, if you're building lineups for a showdown, is there any special process you think you would give? I did a 5-1 last night with a 4% player, and the one bring back was wide receiver 2, and that was duped 60 times. I'm trying to think, like, what can people do to increase the process of eliminating dupes without, as you said, making just a bad lineup?
Yeah, it's tough. We talked about how Showdown's gotten so much sharper. It is really tough at this point. I feel like I've gotten in the sweet spot as much as I can possibly get on DraftKings. There's some slates where I'm like, oh yeah, I think I have a better chance this one, or like others where it's like, I don't know if I'm gonna put like 25 uniques or something, right? So it's tough. I think the biggest thing is just to realize that if it makes sense and you're using a decent amount of salary, it's probably gonna be duplicated pretty heavily. Yeah. If you use most of the salary, it's almost always going to be duplicated pretty heavily. The one you sent me the other day, the 1-4-1, I guess it was, it was correlated, so that makes sense, and that's probably why. The best way is to start building more uncorrelated lineups. If you play kickers and defenses, leave more salary. Clearly 17,000. So I think it's just like if you want to use salary, build more uncorrelated. If you want to leave salary, play kickers and defenses or lower owned guys that way. So, especially with 37-point totals like on Thursday, weird shit can happen. Yeah. One touchdown from a 2K player is automatically optimal, can outscore like 8K guys. We saw it on the Thursday game, right? So, um, yeah, I think with these lower totals, because if you get a high scoring game like last night, um, this is more possible lineups near the salary cap that are going to get there. I think on DraftKings, the winner used the entire salary cap. Where there's less scoring, there's less players that can score well to price out other players, and then just weird stuff happens all the time. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is just like if it makes sense, it's probably going to be duplicated. If it doesn't make sense, you're probably okay. But you can still, you can still make lineups that don't make sense, right? Just think about some of the games we've been seeing, right, Moose?
Yeah, exactly. And I wish I still had the chart up. I gotta go remake it again. But I was looking at average number of dupes because, like you said, you talked before, where we're counting how many uniques and how many less than 10 dupes you have. And it might be cool if you have 50 uniques, but if your other 100 lineups are all duplicated 600 times, it's probably not good. There was one person whose average, he was a 150 maxer, and his average number of duplications per lineup was over 100, which doesn't seem that optimal if you're 150 maxing.
We could give everyone one guess. They could probably figure it out, but let's keep the gossip out of it. But yeah, I mean, that's bad. But that's also why there's an Edge Showdown. People are going to continue to do that. Yeah. People keep seeing this, so we'll take it.
Yeah, because I think, and this will actually be the last thing, and maybe I might be in the minority here, Brian, but if you're 150 maxing, you should absolutely strive to keep that number down, right? Because as we saw last night, if you get a shitty duplicated lineup, and you're still going to lose money if you 150 max it. If you have a ticket, and what'd you say?
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, but if you have a ticket and you have a small bankroll, whatnot, I mean, and you think, oh, this lineup might be good, and you think, this lineup's only going to be duplicated 10, maybe 15 times, and you really like it. I mean, I think you can be okay, and because if you hit a split off a ticket, you have a small bankroll, and you get your 50, 60,000, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I still think that's reasonable. So, but if you look at it and you're like, yeah, this might be duplicated 300 times, don't play that one.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the milli, right? But especially if it's like, and we talked about this last week, right? Like if there's only a certain number of combinations that make sense, I don't mind it that much with your handful of lineups, sure. But you're 150 max, it's like the only point of doing that is if you're promoting something, right? You're on Twitter, you're promoting screenshots. Like that's the only way that makes sense because financially it actually doesn't make sense. And again, if people are going to do that, we're totally fine with them doing it.
Yeah, why try and beat 200,000 people for like a 10% ROI when you can just do that in Smallfield?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, dude. Every time.
Yeah. So, any other last words, comments, thoughts, concerns? We just hit our 9:03. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, they can point them out in the chat as well.
Yeah, I got nothing else. I think let's just monitor it again. I'm sure we'll be right back here next week complaining about the chalk crushing again. But we've seen two really chalky lineups win the milli the last couple of weeks. We might see a third week with how bad pricing is this week. Mm-hmm. But just pray for some busts for once. Like it'd be nice.
That would be nice, yes. But yeah, so that'll do it for tonight's show. Again, I'm Moose alongside Brian. We're from OccupyFantasy.com. We'll be back on Saturday, do the NFL live show. Chris or Brian will be doing the live Q&A in our Discord. And then we'll be back again a week from today to talk about Brian's lineups, how he did. Let's keep that in the green. If you have any more questions, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. You can reach out to any of us on Twitter as well. Email, if you're old school. We don't have any way to send fan mail or letters, so we're not going to respond to that. But until next time, Moose and Brian from Occupy Fantasy.